Good morning. I'm Meredith Barber, and I'm the minister here at Horizon. I'm so glad to welcome you to our worship service. Whoever you are, wherever you are in your journey, however you're joining us this morning, we are glad you're with us. This morning, I want to remind you of our virtual congregational meeting, which will be held at noon next Sunday, February 6th. And for folks who may be looking for small group connection right now, we also hold a virtual coffee hour at 2 p.m. each Sunday, and the link can be found on our website. So we hope that you'll find connection among us. Now let our worship service begin. Our call to worship this morning comes from the writings of the Reverend Lynn Cox. She writes, "Come, you accidental pilgrims who find yourself on a journey of surprise and wonder. Come, you who emerge into this place as an act of liberation. Come, you who seek a life of mindfulness and a place to test your thoughts. Come, you who bring hearts of all kinds, heavy hearts, rusty hearts, hearts broken open in revelation, hearts full of love to share. Come, you who seek courage and who have found more courage than you realize. Come, you who stand behind the curtain, gathering up the resources to claim your truth. Come, you who have been in a bubble, you who are poised for transformation. We begin our story again, gathering courage, love, mindfulness, and a sense of purpose. We gather as people of all ages, of different abilities, different backgrounds, and different perspectives. We share a covenant, a direction for our shared journey, and a commitment to encourage and challenge one another to spiritual growth. This path will ask much from us. Let us move forward with love. Let us move forward with appreciation for one another. Let us move forward knowing we are not alone. Whoever you are, whatever your gifts, you are welcome to join this journey." We light our chalice this morning with these words from Dr. Cornel West, philosopher, activist, author. He writes, "Justice is what love looks like in public." I invite you to say with me the words of our affirmation, which are found in your order of worship. Love is the doctrine of our church, the quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humanity in harmony with the earth, thus do we covenant together. I invite you now to hum or to listen to our opening hymn, Immortal Love. Sing out, O truth divine. That was beautiful. Thank you. This morning, as our offering is given and received, I invite you to consider what it means to give of oneself to something larger than we can imagine. The offering to sustain the ministries of this church will now be joyfully given and received.
Well, good morning, everyone. I am here to do our Time for All Ages today. And I know you're thinking, but where are the children? Well, you know, our kids are on a COVID break right now. And so I want you to just imagine that they're here with us. Some of them are probably watching from home, because the message I have to share with you today is a message for all ages, not just for kids. And so I want to start with a question. Have you ever lived with something for a while, and then you realize that, you know, it's not quite right? Maybe think of your bedroom at home. That's something that kids and teens and adults can imagine in their heads. Maybe when you set up your bedroom, you put your bed on the west wall, but then you discover like the rising sun in the east, you know, wakes you up too early before your alarm. So this living with something is something that's happening to Unitarian Universalism right now. And it's been a long time coming. We've realized that that there's something missing from Unitarian Universalism. So before I talk about this realization or change, let's be reminded that we have 7 principles, and they should be up over here on the board in just a second. And so the 7 principles act as a vessel for our faith. It helps us guide our actions, how we make choices, how we decide to conduct our lives. But here are some of the things that we've found that we are missing. We have been living with these 7 principles, I believe, since 1985, and these are the things we're missing. There's not anything about oppression or anti-racism, nothing about love or how we're supposed to be in community. And since 1985, we've noticed that people are really suffering due to racism and oppressions that directly affect them. And they are asking all Unitarian Universalists to do something about it. And so we needed a way to address this. And so there's something called the proposed 8th principle, and it should come up on the screen in a second. There it is. And I know it's a little hard to read at the bottom, but the bottom, in simplified language, like we would put on a poster in our children's classroom, says, "We work for diversity and against racism and oppression." And we need this principle. These are things we haven't addressed before. We need to make sure everyone feels welcome and loved and is treated fairly, not only at the Horizon and not only in Unitarian Universalism, but also in our society. And so this new principle, it would be like a focus for our efforts. It would be a guide about how we choose to live, how we help build trust with people who are affected by oppression and racism. And it focuses on something called the beloved community. Up here on the screen, the proposed version is in the purple, with the purple background, and you'll notice that it says there's the word beloved community in there. And beloved community happens when people from many different backgrounds and identities come together in an interdependent relationship of love, mutual respect and care, and they seek to realize justice within the community and the broader world. And in the past, I've been in UU for a long time. Sometimes we Unitarian Universalists only look at our own personal spiritual journey, or maybe we just think about what happens at Horizon and not in the broader community. And this is something that the eighth principle is going to help us with. Also, we are a religion based on love, not on sin, and we say we value acceptance and diversity. And so this would be the only principle that would mention love, because what is in the word beloved community but love? And then also, this is also the only principle that would keep us accountable. Accountable means to keep track of, to check up on ourselves. And we measure how we're doing. And maybe you're wondering, well, there's been 7 principles this whole time since 1985. How can we just add a new principle? Well, first of all, I want to remind you, Unitarian Universalism is a living tradition. A living tradition expects that our faith is going to change and grow and evolve as we grow older and mature, as we have new experiences, and as we have new wisdom. And it's a really long process. I would say the seeds for the eighth principle were planted probably in the 1970s. And there's lots and lots of input from congregations, from the people affected by racism and oppression, and then also just people in just regular Unitarian Universalists. And so what's going to happen next? So groups at Horizon have already been talking about the eighth principle. I know in my professional organization, we've probably been talking about it seriously for 3 years. So what you can do is listen for talk about it in worship, in your groups, in your classes, and go ahead and learn about the eighth principle on your own. You can ask me, or Deb Freeman, or Meredith Barber for sources. And did you know that congregations can adopt the eighth principle on their own even before the Unitarian Universalist Association does? I think that's kind of amazing. So I'm going to leave you with an invitation. I want you to go ahead and continue the conversation about the eighth principle. I want all ages to keep in mind their actions in regards to the eighth principle. Keep listening, and of course, just keep asking questions. Thank you.
You're going to hear a lot of those same themes later in the sermon. So our first reading is entitled The Network of Mutuality, and this is a quote from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied to a single garment of destiny. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. There are some things in our social system to which all of us ought to be maladjusted. Hatred and bitterness can never cure the disease of fear. Only love can do that. We must evolve, for all human conflict, a method which rejects revenge, aggression, and retaliation. The foundation of such a method is love. Before it is too late, we must narrow the gaping chasm between our proclamations of peace and our lowly deeds which precipitate and perpetuate war. One day, we must come to see that peace is not merely a distant goal we seek, but a means by which we achieve that goal. We must pursue peaceful ends through peaceful means. We shall hew out of a mountain of despair a stone of hope. Here ends the reading. We come now to the time in our worship service where we share the joys and sorrows of our community, where we share a time of silence, we have a spoken prayer, and we listen to our responsive hymn, Spirit of Life. We have a joy to share today. Much gratitude to everyone who came and volunteered at the cleanup day yesterday and donated to MetroCrest. Big thanks to Deb Freeman for organizing, and Lauren, I'll add that. So much joy in our community. Thank you to everyone who is a part of that. I invite you now, if you're comfortable, to close your eyes for a moment of shared silence. Loving God, Spirit of life, mystery in which we live and move and have our being, draw near to us this morning and hear our prayers. We gather in thanksgiving this morning for the earth we walk, for the air we breathe, for one another, and for life itself. We pray this morning for all who are sick, tired, hurting, all who are unsure of the way ahead. We pray for ourselves and our communities as we travel the road ahead the best way we know how. We hope this morning, we hope against hope, that we might find a way to overcome all that divides us, to open our hearts wider, to seek to understand further. We pray this morning that we might set our fear aside, leave our insecurities behind us, and remember that ours is a living tradition, always challenging us to continue seeking. Whatever our struggles, whatever our concerns, we are all fellow pilgrims, traveling the road of life the best and sometimes the only way we know how. Today and in the days ahead, may we greet each new day with eyes ready to see beauty in the common things of life, with ears ready to listen to one another, and with hearts open to love. May it be so. Amen. I invite us now to hum along or to listen to our responsive hymn, Spirit of Life.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Bruise hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Our second reading this morning comes from the poet and activist Audre Lorde. This is called A Litany for Survival. For those of us who live at the shoreline, standing upon the constant edges of decision, crucial and alone. For those of us who cannot indulge the passing dreams of choice, who love in doorways, coming and going, in the hours between dawns, looking inward and outward, at once before and after, seeking a now that can breed futures, like bread in our children's mouths, so their dreams will not reflect the death of ours. For those of us who were imprinted with fear, like a faint line in the center of our foreheads, learning to be afraid with our mother's milk, for this weapon, this illusion of some safety to be found, the heavy-footed hope to silence us. For all of us, this instant and this triumph, we were never meant to survive. And when the sun rises, we are afraid it might not remain. When the sun sets, we are afraid it might not rise in the morning. When our stomachs are full, we are afraid of indigestion. When our stomachs are empty, we are afraid we may never eat again. When we love, we are afraid love will vanish. When we are alone, we are afraid love will never return. And when we speak, we are afraid. Our words will not be heard nor welcomed, but when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it is better to speak, remembering we were never meant to survive. Here ends the reading. One of my most favorite memories is looking out on my wedding day as I was getting my hair done, kind of chained to the chair, and seeing my dad tending to flowers and sweeping concrete, making sure the space was ready even with only a few hours to go till the ceremony, working up until the last minute. So many of you are gardeners, and I am not. I do not have that skill, but my dad is. I grew up knowing that caring for things that are alive is important. My dad has always been the kind of person who can grow something almost anywhere. I think we probably have some of those among us here today. And every time I visit my parents at their home, there are new blooms, new creations taking root. And for my father, I think this is his way of being a spiritual person in the world, his way of adding to and experiencing the beauty of creation. So right now it's cold and not planting season yet. But we know that spring comes on fast in this part of the country. Before you know it, it'll probably be 100 degrees. And so it's time for us to think about the kinds of seeds we'd like to plant. This morning, we're starting a conversation, one that I hope will keep going throughout my time with you. As Lauren shared earlier, in our Unitarian Universalist faith, we have 7 principles. Now, many people think that these have always been a part of our tradition, but that's not the case. We know that our faith tradition is one of connection, of 2 denominations, the Unitarians and the Universalists, coming together to officially become one tradition in 1961. We are both an ancient tradition theologically and a very young faith organizationally. And our 7 principles are the result, largely, of the work of Unitarian Universalist women who began the conversation about the essential values of our faith and the need to declare them. After much dialogue and discussion, because we are Unitarian Universalists after all, our 7 principles were adopted in 1985, like Lauren shared with us earlier. And though I, like many of my colleagues, don't always speak directly about these, they are ever present in our worship services, in the lighting of our chalice, in our affirmation of faith, in the words we sing and say together. It's kind of like an undertow, always leading in the same direction, always there beneath the surface. And while our principles are not doctrine or dogma, they are guides for how we want to live our lives and how we want to be together as a church community. They serve as threads that connect us. Here in this community, our experiences are vast. Maybe you're just discovering Unitarian Universalism and this is all new to you, and that is such an exciting place to be. Or maybe you've been a part of our tradition since long before the principles were a thing, and you've lived this history. No matter what experience you're bringing with you, I invite you to listen now as I share the words of our principles, and I invite you to consider what values you hear in these words and what might be missing. So here now are our 7 principles. We affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. A free and responsible search for truth and meaning. The right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and society at large. The goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Respect for the interdependent web of all existence, of which we are a part. So what's here and what's not? There's a lot here about seeking truth, about finding connection with one another and with the world around us. There's a lot about the kind of world we want to create. But, as Lauren mentioned earlier, there's also nothing here about love, about the way we love one another, or about the evils of oppression that are ever present in our worlds. And that is challenging for those of us who are seeking a faith that meets us where we are, in the world as it is, and not the world of our dreams. For how can we truly love one another if we are not acknowledging the reality in which others live? In the reading we heard earlier from Audre Lorde, we saw a window into the raw realities of the queer experience. And I think we can use her beautiful words and that understanding and apply it to many other experiences as well. For the past few years, there have been people and groups within Unitarian Universalism who have been advocating for a new principle to be added, an 8th principle, which specifically articulates a commitment to anti-racism. Advocates for the 8th principle include Black Lives of UU, DRUM, Diverse Revolutionary UU Multicultural Ministries, anti-racism advocates, ministers, UU congregations, and UUs of color, people who understand the need for constant action in the name of racial justice. The text of the 8th principle goes like this. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our communities. There's a lot being said there, but we'll go through it together. We say, as a part of our mission and vision statements, that we believe in a beloved community, filled with compassion, helping all to thrive in a just world. Beloved community is our forever goal, something we are always working toward. But within that, the fact is that we are not there yet, even though some might say otherwise. Not in our local communities, absolutely not in our country, and maybe this is the hardest to hear, not in our church communities either. I don't mean to suggest that we aren't kind to one another or that we don't care for one another well. I've experienced thoughtfulness and compassion from this community in the time I've been your minister. But it is a different thing altogether to intentionally build beloved community. It is about the way we treat each other, but also about how our systems treat each other. The term beloved community was, of course, made famous by Dr. King. He said that the aftermath of nonviolence is the creation of beloved community, a community in which everyone is cared for, absent poverty, hunger, and hate. He had faith that such a thing was possible. But maybe most importantly, King always acknowledged that this could not possibly be an individual endeavor, but would require change across all systems of society. None of us can do this alone. We need one another. Reverend Michael Slack, Unitarian Universalist minister and founder of the Transforming Hearts Collective, describes beloved community this way. For King, beloved community was a goal to be achieved. It was a vision for how the world could be. And it really began with recognizing this notion that we are in fact all different people. We're different people and we show up with different ideals, different values, different understandings of how the world works. We exist in the world in different ways. We are one church, and we certainly can't control all of society. We know that right now, perhaps more than ever before. But we are our own system, and we can make change in our own little corner of the world, in our religious tradition and in our community. My philosophy when it comes to doing hard, overwhelming things is to start with what we can control. And so that means we start here with us. We know, too, that we have spiritual ancestors who have walked this path before us. We are not alone, not the first, and will certainly not be the last to take on struggles at the core of our humanity. We have ancestors who have been here before who have taken risks in the name of faith. We have ancestors who were abolitionists, who heeded Dr. King's call on ministers to march in Selma. And we know that this isn't the full story, but it's also true that Unitarians and Universalists alike have strong histories of justice work. I often wonder what our children and our children's children will think when they look back at this time in history. What questions will they have for us about what we did and what we didn't do? In my opinion, racial justice is one of the biggest issues facing our country and our world today, certainly one of the most important facing Unitarian Universalism. New members and people new to Unitarian Universalism often say they want and have found here a group of people with similar values who they can work alongside to make the world better. And I love that so much. That gives me so much hope for our future. It feels to me like the eighth principle is an affirmation of that commitment to racial justice, a way of making our beliefs more explicit. I don't think we can afford to ignore these calls, both from within and outside our community. Now is the time to start thinking about who we want to be. The eighth principle also talks about accountability. And, like anything worth having, accountability is complicated. But in Unitarian Universalism, we talk a lot about covenant, about making promises to each other when we're at our best, knowing that when we are at our worst, we'll probably fall short because we are human beings and we make mistakes. And I think the beautiful thing about our tradition is that we also make pathways for people to come back into relationship, into covenant when we do make mistakes. It's not this attitude of if you've done something wrong, you're out. It's okay to make a mistake, and we have a way to come back into relationship. I think, especially too with racial justice work, that a lot of us are looking for systems to hold ourselves accountable for making change. At least I am. And it is easier to get overwhelmed, to look away, or to think we've already done enough. But that's not really the call, is it? I've said before that we don't do the work we do to see measurable change, but because we are committed to and believe in the work. If I only took on work in which I saw a measurable change, I certainly would not be in ministry. This also means that commitment to anti-racism, to racial justice, specifically through the eighth principle, it's not the kind of thing that we say we do once and we forget about. It's something we will constantly need to be working on. And this is good and holy work, the kind of work that can shake or topple your faith and build it back again. The kind of work that is worth opening our hearts to. Many have rightly pointed out, like Lauren did earlier, again and again, that the eighth principle is the only one that acknowledges suffering and oppression in our world. And I would add, it also calls on us to do something about it. You might be thinking that this is covered under our first principle, inherent worth and dignity, but I don't think it really gets all the way there. For me, affirming inherent worth and dignity and acknowledging oppression are two different things. I think they come to the same logical conclusion that if we treat everyone with respect, that no person should be oppressed, but they are two different rivers flowing to the same stream. So you may wonder, why would we change our principles? Or if other congregations are doing this? And these are real and valid questions, and yes, they are. Many congregations around the world have adopted the eighth principle, and eventually the UUA, as an association of congregations, I hope will do the same. And I think what's behind this is a desire, especially of people of color and allies within our congregations, that there be a specific stated commitment towards anti-racism throughout the UUA. It feels essential to the future of our faith that we consider our role in this work. But why would we change our principles? Well, the answer to that is simple. I think it's because we have new information. Our principles have changed before, as we said. Many of you who've been around longer than I have may be aware of that or even remember changes to the principles in the 80s and 90s over some sexist language. I am a raised Unitarian Universalist, and as a preacher's kid, that journey hasn't always been easy. There were times before ministry when I wasn't sure if our tradition was right for me. I knew we said a lot of things that felt right, but I wasn't sure if we did as much as we talked about doing. One of the things that has called me back to our faith throughout my lifetime, even at times when I wasn't sure about my beliefs, my community, or my call, is our living tradition, or our belief that revelation is forever unfolding. I love our belief that there is always new wisdom to discover. This allows us to grow and change our minds as we uncover new truths. It allows for a lifelong commitment to learning and to exploration. It allows us to listen to new prophetic voices that emerge from our midst. And it also means that we are each called to open our minds and our hearts to that new wisdom, wherever it finds us, especially those nuggets of wisdom that are hard to swallow. It has been heartening over my lifetime to see a change from talk to action in our faith, to realize that we have something to say about oppression in our world. So finally, the language of the eighth principle contains this idea of journeying towards spiritual wholeness. And I feel like we cannot possibly be made whole while also ignoring the oppression of others. This is not to say that it's each of our responsibilities to save the world. But what does it mean to be called beloved? What does it mean to be loved? I think it means different things to different people, certainly, but I can tell you what it doesn't mean. Those we love do not feel beloved when their humanity is questioned. Those we love do not feel beloved when their place of worship, where they want to bring their whole hearts, is not always as welcoming as maybe it could be. And I'm not saying that that's true here at Horizon, but it has historically been true throughout our tradition. It's not too late, though, to change. So as we think this morning about the eighth principle, about our commitments, about the seeds we want to sow, I go back to the reading we heard earlier from Dr. King. We've all heard the refrain, "Only love can do that." But these prophetic words have often been used to silence people, as if love can only mean quiet acceptance, as if love cannot mean pushing those we care about toward better ways of being in the world. We can't control everyone, certainly, a hard lesson to learn. But there are so many times when it is more loving to tell the truth, to speak up, to ask a question, to draw a boundary, than to just accept what is all around us. I keep thinking of the hymn that goes, "I don't want to get adjusted to the world below." I've always taken that to mean that there's a better way of living out there, and also that I don't want to become numb to the problems of this world. At the same time, there is so much outside of our control. Like I said, we're one church, but we're not the only ones in this struggle, wondering what our legacy and what our future will look like, trying to decide how to show a commitment to those we care about. So this morning, I'm returning to the seeds, to seeds burrowed down in the fresh and fertile soil, to the fruit they might bear, a mystery, even to the gardener. May it be so. Amen. I invite you now to listen or to hum along to our closing hymn, "Come and Go With Me."
Request for you out there in the congregation. Come and go with me to the land. Come and go with me to the land. Come and go with me to the land where I'm bound. Come and go with me to the land. Come and go with me to the land. Come and go with me to the land where I'm bound. There'll be justice in the land. There'll be justice in the land. There'll be justice in the land where I'm bound. There'll be justice in the land. There'll be justice in the land. There'll be justice in the land where I'm bound. There'll be freedom in the land. There'll be freedom in the land. There'll be freedom in the land where I'm bound. There'll be freedom in the land. There'll be freedom in the land. There'll be freedom in the land where I'm bound. There'll be singing in the land. There'll be singing in the land. There'll be singing in the land where I'm bound. There'll be singing in the land. There'll be singing in the land. There'll be singing in the land where I'm bound.
Thank you so much for your joy this morning, Dan. I love it. We extinguish the flame of our chalice, but not our mission to welcome radically, love boldly, grow spiritually, and serve courageously. This we do because we envision a beloved community filled with compassion, helping all to thrive in a just world. So friends, my prayer for you all this morning is that you open your hearts to the seeds we are planting here, that they may bear fruit. Go in peace.